And if it's all piece of the puzzle, if someone lands on your page from an ad that they see, they're likely going to dive further into the content. And so if they see that you've been posting about this, you have a lot of resources that you can point people to, again, kind of going to the video side of it as well, they're going to get more use and they're more likely to convert if they see, okay, this is the person or the company that I need to go with because they have portrayed their value to me. And now I understand why I can't survive without this tool or service.
You're listening to Content Logistics, a podcast for B2B marketers where we explore the foundational and sometimes frustrating elements of content. We're talking to the experts, learning all their tips and tricks. We don't gatekeep here. Let's get started. For years, rank tracking has been a core part of an SEO strategy, monitoring keyword positions, optimizing for higher rankings, and using that data to prove success. But the playbook has completely changed. Google has made major updates to disrupt rank tracking tools, making it harder to measure search positions the way we used to. So what does this mean for marketers? Is rank tracking truly dead, or is it just evolving? In today's episode, we're diving into the changing search landscape and what we should do next. We'll explore why Google is making these changes and what smart SEO measurement looks like moving forward. Joining me today is Colin Costigan, and he is truly at the forefront of these changes. He has personally helped me a lot in this area, and I am so excited to have him on as a guest. So we're going to talk about what's happening, what this means for marketers, and most importantly, how to stay ahead. Let's get into it. Hey, Colin, thanks so much for joining me on the show today. I'm super excited to just dive into SEO and all these changes that have been going on.
Yeah, Baylee, thanks so much for having me. Very excited for our conversation today.
I know we talk about this a lot internally, all the changes that have been going on, and really the playbook has just changed so much. It's really hard to keep track of. But I know we're trying to keep this episode not super technical, but just give people a general idea of what's been going on and really just some actionable insights of how you can take some of these changes and implement it into your marketing strategy. So let's maybe just dive into a little bit of that technical piece, like what has changed in the past year and how does it impact rank tracking? Like specifically, I know requiring JavaScript was a big thing, but I'll just let you go ahead and speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like we were talking about, before we started this recording, there's so many things that you can dive into as far as a rabbit hole of what is changing in SEO, and Google is no stranger to rolling out algorithm updates. And that has, even in recent years, really taken a step up. They will roll out algorithm updates and never give the audience like a heads up of what they did until maybe a decent amount of time later. So there's always so many different things that you can dive into as far as what's changed, why has it changed, and how can we change our content to match that so that we can continue to rank, but also, is ranking number one still vital? Some of the arguments that I'll provide, maybe ranking number one isn't as vital because there's so many different aspects that lean into what is going to bring the most traffic and the most relevant traffic to your website, which is typically the goal for, I know, most of the clients that we work with and likely a lot of the people that listen to this podcast.
We're starting off strong with some good hot takes that might be a little controversial. I love that it's maybe not important to rank number one. That I'm sure would probably ruffle some feathers saying that. But why do you think it's not so important anymore to rank number one?
So keyword rankings specifically have become just convoluted in some sort of way. So now Google isn't the only thing that people are searching on. A lot of that has to do with ChatGPT now introducing their own search browser, or even Google's aspect of utilizing AI overviews that you can find at the top of a lot of those searches. Specifically in B2B, it occurs a little bit less, but it's definitely growing as far as the Google search algorithm. And even keywords that you rank for, but there's zero-click searches. So that means that people are finding your site from all of these other places. So that could be ChatGPT, that could be the AI overview, but they don't need to dive into these things because they're getting a summary of what they're looking for without actually having to visit your website. So is there an easy way to measure that? Not likely, but that will change in the future is my guess.
Yeah, I know us personally at Marketers in Demand recently, we've gotten a bunch of leads through ChatGPT, which is so cool. And if you think about the buying cycle, honestly, it's so much easier to use ChatGPT to find a solution than to try and think of the right keywords to search on Google, because ChatGPT can give you a bunch of resources to find those things. But SEO, I feel like, does play a role in that. Having good content does play a role in that, because I mean, it's a little bit black box how ChatGPT is getting all those resources, but in general, it tends to show like the high ranking results, the results that have good content. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, what I'll say is there are a lot of similarities in how ChatGPT will rank things. There are certainly a lot of differences as well, but also with how Google algorithm updates work. And there's always a main goal that they've been pushing towards over the past decade with all of the updates that they make, and that is providing the end user with the most helpful content based on their search. A lot of that comes from different tactics that have been introduced over the years, like EAT, which is the experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, baking that into your content, not utilizing like just putting one line into ChatGPT and then having it spit out a blog and just uploading that blindly, not posting content that isn't really relevant to what your expertise is. And we've seen some big names get penalized for that in recent months. HubSpot, for example, was posting things that they really aren't an authority on. And so it would be like someone in a manufacturing space posting content on why McDonald's dollar menu may be the go-to for what to buy when you're looking for lunch. It's just something that they're not necessarily an expert in. We see this more commonly with like news sites or spam sites that kind of gather a lot of links. And Google has been penalizing those very heavily. And we can see the swing in a lot of those metrics. Even recent months, they kind of erased about 40% of the internet as far as what pops up as a search result. And that was because there's just so much out there as far as the library of what the internet is that wasn't helpful to the end user.
Yeah. I think for maybe listeners who don't understand a lot of this, it's these high domain authority sites. Basically, they get paid to link to these other smaller sites because it helps with the rankings and these other sites' domain authority. So sometimes these high domain authority sites will publish blogs or articles or whatever in order to help out these other sites. But really, it's just kind of maybe like black hat SEO. Like, it isn't a good thing to do, but that's why they're getting penalized. Again, going back to what you said earlier about we want to create a good user experience, and it just doesn't make sense for a HubSpot to post content that isn't related to their CRM services.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself.
I think you did say it better than, but I'm just trying to dumb it down a little. Great. Well, I feel like, what was it? A month or two ago, Google really broke a bunch of things with their JavaScript update. Do you mind talking just a little bit about that at a high level?
So Google recently started requiring JavaScript to be utilized on a search, and that was really to limit the use of bots and the bot traffic that was inflating results. That was very hard to separate from real results and real people trying to find your website. So now with the tools that a lot of people in this space use, like a Ahrefs or a SEMrush, they had to sort of pivot their approach on how they're crawling a website, not only for what is this content ranking for and where does it rank specifically, but even finding issues in the back end that also lead to the SEO health score, which at the end of the line leads to, is Google going to rank you higher? You know, they are going to rank websites higher based on the care and maintenance that are put into websites. And so if you show that you're fixing issues and you're improving the user journey, then you're going to rank higher as long as your content is relevant as well. And so when they introduced JavaScript, again, that was to limit the bot traffic that was going to websites. And that had a hard impact on these tools that we utilize every day.
I had a client reach out to me and they were using a SEMrush report and they were like, all our rankings are gone. And I was like, wait, hold up a minute. I was like, just search on Google. Are you still showing up? Like, sometimes we overcomplicate things and we really rely on these tools that show us our rankings when, I mean, yeah, you could just look it up, or especially just using Google Search Console. I know Google's really trying to get people to use their platforms over these third-party platforms as well.
Absolutely. And to your point, like we do rely on tools every day because they have made our lives a lot easier. But at the end of the day, you still need to know what you're looking at and where it's important. To your point about Google tools, Google's always going to prefer themselves. So we see that come across the market in so many different ways, but combining the data that you're seeing from separate tools. So if you see something in Google Analytics, you probably have also checked that in Ahrefs or a SEMrush like tool. You should now introduce, if you haven't already, checking Google Search Console to make sure that the queries that you're trying to rank for are getting the results that match or at least tell the same story that you're seeing in tools like Google Analytics or other tools like that.
Yeah, definitely. I want to go back to some things you said earlier about what Google likes to see in order to rank. What would you say are some important factors that marketers should pay attention to if they're trying to rank for specific keywords?
Yeah, so it really comes down to being an expert in what you're talking about and not only having like, I want this page to rank for this specifically, but having a topic cluster is often what it's referred to, and making sure that you have more resources to that same topic, not just one blog or one asset that's pointing to it. Because again, you want to appear to have authority and expertise in this space. And so Google is relying on seeing more content based on the same topic. So they know, okay, this is a good result for our end user to see, and this is where we want to push them. At the end of the day, things have changed. And so it's not always about ranking number one, because there are the search engine ranking page features, there's AI overviews, there's now image and video is also so crucial in how you drive Google to rank your site a little bit higher. And exact match keywords have sort of shifted in how they're driving content or driving traffic to your website. So you want to make sure that you have comprehensive topic driven content that your users can browse and understand this is the right answer to what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think I've noticed a lot of people get stuck on making sure a piece of content is perfect or just really wanting to make sure it's great, which I agree. We should make sure content is good before we publish it on our sites, but it sounds like getting more content is a bigger priority than having just maybe a handful of web pages on your site.
100%. And I think the important thing to note about content is that it doesn't have to be perfect when you first roll it out. A website is organic. That's, blogs, pages that you're creating, whether they're landing pages or topic pages, whatever they may be. You can change that based on data that has shifted in the space or something, a new tool that you've released and you can speak more to. And so constantly updating the content that lives on these pages, such as a blog or a topic page or a category page, is going to show Google, again, similar to fixing issues that are found in the back end of your website, that you care about what the end user is finding on your website and you want to give them the best answer possible.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to optimize or update a page than it is to create a brand new piece of content, for sure.
Yes.
I way rather do that. Definitely. Okay, let's talk a little bit about rank tracking a bit more. We've already talked about how maybe SEMrush or Ahrefs maybe are not the most reliable tools, and also maybe rank isn't the first metric we should be tracking when it comes to your SEO objectives. But what would you recommend someone tracks instead? What is a better metric to pay attention to?
Yeah, and even starting a little bit higher than the specific metrics, Ahrefs or SEMrush, like they're great tools to use, but you want to have them in a tool belt with some other tools. So like we mentioned before, Google Search Console and Google Analytics are something that Google is always going to push you to use, especially because they do offer them for free once you're set up in the Google Workspace. With that tool set that you now have, you want to look at all of these different platforms and find what's in the middle of this data. So with Google Search Console, you want to look at the queries that are coming across. You want to see the impressions and clicks that are coming across. And if your impressions and clicks are climbing, then it's not necessarily important that you rank number 5 for this instead of number 1, because you're still getting a good share of that traffic. Other things to make sure that you're tracking as far as metrics as we dive into that. Do you have a high bounce rate, or as Google is now shifting to, are people engaged? What's the engagement rate or time of engagement that people are on these pages? Are they sitting there and doing nothing, or are they actually scrolling through the pages, clicking through to other resources? And again, that's a good indicator to Google that your resource is actually helpful. One that was introduced not too long ago in the world of SEO, as it spans, several decades at this point, but the share of voice metric tracking your brand visibility across not only things like search, but also social media. Where are other tools or platforms mentioning you, even other spaces or popular resources within your industry specifically. So if your industry is pointing to you, like if you're in the financial space and Forbes is pointing to you, that's a great backlink to have, but also that's going to drive a lot of traffic to your website because people trust Forbes and they're then going to trust your site because they think Forbes has done their due diligence, which they have.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about this share of voice. What are some tools you could use to calculate this, and how do you maybe get an idea of what your share is?
Yeah, so tools that we've mentioned already, like Ahrefs or SEMrush, do track these. It is a little bit arbitrary at this time as they're always looking to improve what the metrics are that factor into these measurements. And so it'll track as, a percentage or something that you have. And it's almost like, what is your brand authority in this space, or how much of the market share do you have that is going to be represented in your share of voice? So if people are searching for a topic and you're ranking against a competitor that one is putting out a lot of content about this topic or has been an authority in this space for a long time, it's going to be hard to beat them in that number one ranking. But people also in this day and age scroll past number one. We kind of blindly scroll past all these sponsored links that we see.
Yeah.
And that's not in every space. And we don't, we still want to bid in the PPC world on some keywords that are going to drive traffic. But the share of voice is going to measure, okay, you're not ranking number one, or you may be ranking number one, but how much traffic are you still getting from this sort of query that you're driving?
Yeah. So is share of voice related to an industry, or is it related to a specific topic? So like you could have different types of shares of voice in a specific industry. Sorry,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
absolutely. Yeah. And it's a good thing to dive into. So share of voice is going to be more topic related. It's not going to be, which, disseminates down from an industry. So like we said at the beginning of this call, an industry has an expertise. They should have topic clusters around the different areas of expertise within that industry. And your share of voice is going to be based on those specific topics that people are looking into.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I love that it's not so focused on just what your ranking is, but how are you just speaking your expertise in a specific topic?
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially niching down. I know we talk about that so much, but making sure your topics communicate to, I mean, a lot of our clients are really highly technical, and so we have to make sure that it's speaking to that specific audience rather than something super broad.
100%. And to give an analogy, because marketing is second to none as far as having to provide analogies on what we're talking about, especially when we get super technical on topics like these. It's like when you're in high school and you have that one kid that's going to talk about everything, even though they have no idea what they're talking about. But then you have the teacher who knows what they're talking about, the lesson that they're providing. You're going to trust what the teacher says before you trust what that other kid is saying. And that's what you want to lean into.
Yeah, I love that. Great analogy. You're pulling that out so fast. Amazing. Well, let's see. We've covered so many of the things I already wanted to talk about today. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, we see a query in Google Search Console. What if that query is not getting traffic? We're noticing that it's not, maybe it's not converting, or we're not getting the traffic we want. What would you recommend would be the next step, assuming it's something we really want to show up for?
Yeah. So a few things to check into before you just disband, like, I don't want to try and drive any more effort to ranking for this. You want to see, and SEO is no stranger to this attribution world that is just less and less every day. It's harder to track, but you want to track it as much as possible. So you can still see within Google Search Console and combine it with, whatever form tool or whatever CRM you're using. Is this driving people, even if, you're only getting 20 hits to the page, is it driving a few conversions of people filling out that form? And this is where they started in their journey. Does it have any impact on revenue? So before you disband that topic that you're referring to or writing about, you want to check those metrics as well. One thing I'll also always say is, are you too specific in what you're talking about? Our clients, or any client in the marketing space, or really any industry, they're experts on what they're talking about, but the audience that they serve may not refer to it in such a technical manner that they do. They may look at it in such a broader topic. And so while broad search is a a totally different thing to delve into, and you don't want to get too broad about what you're talking about, there are levels that you can sort of backtrack and say, okay, we got way too focused on this specific terminology. What other ways can we refer to this? How can we bake that content into our topic? And making sure that those keywords are represented based on anything that someone may refer to your product or tool or resource as.
Yeah, I have a good example of this. So we have a very technical client, and they have been using the name of their product as the search term that they're trying to rank for, and it gets no search traffic. And I think there's a lot of assumptions in there thinking, okay, they have a really technical audience. They probably know what this is. So there's definitely a lot of assumptions going in there. But no search traffic there. But when we change the verbiage to a more general, like, what do you do? And they do medical waste disposal, then they started showing up. People are actually searching those types of things rather than the specific name of their product.
Yeah, you want to think about it almost as like a Venn diagram in some sort of way. So you have your expertise in the service or the product that you offer. You have the audience that's trying to find it. What is the overlapping, terminology that people are going to refer to it? Often that is they're looking for a specific feature or something that's going to solve a pain point that they have been hitting their head against the wall for, and they need to now utilize a service or purchase a product to make that process a lot easier, solve the challenge that they've been facing. And so that is really what you want to drive as far as the focus on the content or the keywords that you're baking into that content more specifically. Keyword rankings are kind of like a piece of the puzzle. And so you want to make sure that your content is also engaging, it's capturing the attention. And oftentimes, especially in the B2B space, a brand name isn't well known. So you want to focus more on what they do and what it solves.
Maybe that's another hot topic. Like, should people be trying to rank for their brand name? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll never come across a website that doesn't mention their brand. So they're going to rank for it in some sort of way, whether it's the first page or, the 2 millionth result on Google's search engine ranking page. So that will come with time as they gain more of that share of voice and more of that authority in the space. So the first step is always to drive more towards what do you solve? How do you solve it? And how can you improve the lives of the people who need your product or service?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great idea. I think I kind of want to get into the meat of this. This might be a hard question, Colin, but SEO is changing so much. I feel like every month I see a huge new update, and it's like, oh man, got to change our strategy again. But how can people future-proof their strategies? Like, what are some best practices? And I know it's a loaded question, but what just general tips would you give to someone that's maybe feeling overwhelmed with all of these updates?
That is a loaded question, and I'm very happy to dive into it. I think it really goes back to the foundation that we've talked about already, and that is, yes, there's algorithm updates. They change the ranking factors. They change, what they're looking into as far as the back end of a website and the content and people's experience on the site. But it all comes down to the end user, how they're experiencing your site, and are they getting what they need? So it goes back to that sort of EAT authority, right? So the expertise, experience, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. Are you proving that you are an expert in this space, that you know what you're talking about, and that you are resolving the question or the need of the user that you're trying to get a purchase out of, whether it be for your product or tool or service? And are they finding that quickly? Do they have to engage further to sort of pull out what does this tool actually solve? I'm always a big proponent of not really hiding your approach, but promoting your approach, because there's so many different products and services and tools from so many different companies that overlap in many different ways. And you want to show why you're different, why you're better, or why someone should use you over a competitor. And I'm not saying that you need to name bash your competitors, but I think that you should represent why you're different, and not only in your key differences or your unique selling propositions, but showcasing to the end user, because they're doing so many different searches. People now do so much research before they dive into a tool, especially before they spend money on something, that you need to convey that pretty quickly. There's always the rule of if they're not getting what they need in the first 5 seconds, they're not even going to dive further into that page, let alone go to other pages.
Yeah, I have a lot of people that are just nervous. People are going to steal their content or steal their strategy, and people are too busy. It might happen, but I mean, if you're doing a good thing and if you're really offering a good product, you shouldn't be worried about someone stealing your stuff. You're just going to be doing it better than
Exactly.
yeah. Let's maybe dive into that EAT framework that you talked about. We could talk through each of those and how you would measure success. So I think the first one you mentioned was expertise.
Yeah. So in this, it's EEAT, right? So it can go in any of those orders with the acronyms. Again, marketing and the military are like very famous for having these acronyms. So yeah, experience and expertise. So experience, you want to showcase, we've done this for X amount of years. We've done this with X amount of clients. We've driven this kind of result. And that also leans into expertise. So showcasing, whether if it's a tool that drives revenue growth or is streamlining process, you want to show, hey, we can drive this and improve your process by 40% so that your lead time is now shrunk down. That's what people are often looking for. The authoritativeness and trustworthiness, that all of these sort of coincide within each other, but you want to show why you're the authority in this space. And that comes from how long have we done this, why we're doing this, what our approach is, why we're an expert in this space, and why you should utilize our tool or product. And trustworthiness is that we don't just change what we're saying all the time. We have the same approach. We know you may adapt your approach, but you still have that same goal in mind of why you started your company, and showing that to the end user why they should trust you. And that's through consistently posting content, not waiting for it to be absolutely perfect. So you go 3 months or maybe even longer in some cases without a blog. There's always the importance or value of driving more content and then honing it in later based on the data that you're seeing, and not just waiting to have the holy grail of content that you can push forward, because oftentimes that's unattainable.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, for example, this episode, I don't know how relevant this is going to be in 6 months. Hopefully we're talking about big picture enough stuff, but the stuff about JavaScript, yeah, it's going to be pretty irrelevant. But I want to be fresh about what's going on right now in the industry. I know we have so many clients, like we work with a lot of people in manufacturing. And right now there's a lot of talk about tariffs. I'm like, let's get some content out there talking about how we can address this. And if it's not relevant in 6 months, let's just change the approach. Like, we can update it, but that's going to be something that people really want to hear about right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And timely content is always going to have value. When news breaks, whether it's from politics or changes in systems or changes in policies, there's always going to be an influx of traffic to keywords that are relevant to that topic. And so you want to release timely content. Again, that speaks to, it doesn't have to be perfect when you release it, but if you are accurate in what you're saying and you adjust based on new data, then Google will factor that in. And Google isn't the only search engine that we want to optimize for. There's other tools like Bing and even ChatGPT or other AI driven searches. But you want to make sure that you are speaking in a timely manner about this topic so that you're getting, again, that share of the voice that is relevant in this time. News breaks so often and so consistently across so many different spaces that if you miss out even for a week or a month, you may have missed the gap or the influx of search that is going on, and you could have captured it.
Yep, definitely. Let's go back to something you talked about earlier with video and images being really important in content that you're posting. What's your take on that? Like, what type of video should people be posting, and maybe pictures as well?
Yeah. So search engines are always going to play a favorite to owned media, and that's something that you create and post. So not utilizing, and there's nothing wrong with if you don't have content going to a stock library and finding something relevant, but that won't play as much of a factor in Google favoriting your content. They have grown tired of people just utilizing stock photography and publishing that across blogs or landing pages, whatever you're sending people to. So if you're creating explainer videos, or if you're creating this use case video and you have pictures of a team using it or pictures of how it's built, that is always going to factor into why you're ranking. And then in the back end of that, you can also have alt text that's baked in. So not only for the accessibility aspect of that, but what keywords are relevant to this image and why are you showing up for this result? So If you have content that's baked into something, you have a relevant image or video that's baked in and you're putting that at the top or somewhere in the middle of your content, then have keywords baked into that description of that video or the description of that image. And that will start to populate when people go to Google Images or Google Videos.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's why I have this podcast. I've said this before. I don't care if anyone listens to the actual podcast, but all the video clips I get, my social content, I use it on the blogs because it does help. It makes the blogs a lot more interesting and just adds some dynamic visualizations to any type of content you're putting out there.
Absolutely. There's always been the adage that video is king, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. There's also just a lot of other aspects that people research into. So they'll check text. Do I need to do I believe this? Do I agree with this? I'll watch the video overview of it. Does this image is my team experiencing what it looks like this team is solving in this image? So always having some sort of other content that you can promote, or even as you mentioned, like social proof and getting your audience to see it on another channel or platform that then leads them to dive into that blog because maybe they missed it or maybe they didn't search the right keyword or key phrase to find the article, but now they see it listed on social platforms and they know that they need to utilize that.
Yeah. I mean, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It's cliche, but sometimes it's a lot easier just to scan a picture and know if it's gonna answer your question or not.
Yes.
For people who are struggling in this phase or they're trying to keep up or maybe they're just getting started, I know that's a lot of situations, but what advice would you give to them on how to just tackle SEO?
I think one thing to understand is that SEO isn't just about ranking number one anymore. People are diving further into results than that. It's about being where your audience is in the format on the platform that they prefer and driving home the point of what you're saying and what you're the expert in. When you're trying to understand what did Google roll out in this algorithm update, and they're going to put it in a log of content updates in their algorithm log that goes for miles and miles because it's been going on forever. So embracing new things that have come out and always checking into the data of several different tools to understand what is the story here. Yes, maybe this only got 50 searches this month, but it also led to like 30 people clicking on your website. So that's content that's useful to have because it also drove out of those 30 people clicking 5 conversions. And so you really need to keep that. That's not something to throw away because of a low search volume. And so the future of SEO in my mind is about proving value through real world impact. So are people having a good experience on your site? Are they going to other pages after they land on whatever they've searched on? And are they converting after that?
Yeah. I think too, if people have an executive that maybe just, we have people ask us like, are we showing up in the AI search? That's something I've had so many executives ask me. I was like, okay, let's take a step back. What's the goal of SEO? And you nailed it on the head. Are we getting leads? Are we creating a good experience? Are people spending time on our website? That is so much more important than, are we showing up in the AI search? Sure, we want that to happen, but that should be like the 10th thing we're worried about.
Yeah, and AI search is a whole other topic that we could have an episode or a series based on. And there are companies coming out that are experts in that space as well. But it all leans back to that main goal of helping the end user, but also thinking beyond. Google is always the main name. You know, they had about 90% of the market share of search. And so they've always been the big driver in that. That is shifting somewhat. Not that it's dropping to like 75%, but it's dropping a little bit. And so it may be no surprise, but YouTube is the second biggest search engine, and who is their owner? Google. So how do we start to put out video content on YouTube so that people are searching that? There's millions and millions of people searching on YouTube every day. TikTok, LinkedIn, other platforms where people are engaging or looking for content that's useful in their world, putting out useful content on that all fits into like the bigger puzzle piece of what marketing is, and SEO and social and all of those, PPC, they're all different pieces of the puzzle to paint the bigger picture.
Yeah, I love that. Not just relying on one channel. It's a full experience working with the company, definitely. And YouTube too.
Don't put all of your eggs in one basket.
Yep, I completely agree. YouTube too is so interesting. I have clients post stuff on there and it's so niche, and then I'll look at it a month later and I'm like, whoa, you got 700 views, which in the scheme of things is not a lot, but for them being such a niche company, I'm like, whoa, it's kind of crazy.
It's all relative, right? So, if it's 700 people, is that 700 more possible customers than you have currently? That's a big movement. And if it's driving revenue, then it doesn't matter if it's 1 million people or 700 people, as long as those 700 people are getting what they need. And ultimately, is a percentage of that converting and becoming a customer or buying your tool or whatever it may be that you're trying to promote through those videos.
Yeah, it's a long-term strategic play. I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, and she talked about fame or fortune. Are you trying to go viral, or are you trying to make money? And if you're trying to make money, 700 views is awesome. Like
Yes.
that's great. If you're hitting your audience and getting people to engage with you, that's great. Where with fortune, or sorry, with fame, like you might be famous, but it's not going to your bigger goals of trying to make money.
Yeah. And it's also understanding like SEO, and most people know this, and people who may be getting freshly into the game may not know, but SEO is never going to move the needle right away. So even when you put out timely content, that could be a huge influx of traffic, but you also want other content on your website that speaks to that same topic or promotes your authority in that space. And you want a long list of topics that people can dive into further or beyond that. You want to, I typically say you want about 6 months of data in SEO and posting content consistently before you start to see real world results. Some of those will come quicker, and those are great wins to have. But also when you hit that 6 month point, don't stop. Keep producing valuable content.
Yeah, that's really helpful to know. 6 months of good content. Yeah, results don't come quickly, but they definitely do pay off.
Yes. And if it's all piece of the puzzle, if someone lands on your page from an ad that they see, they're likely going to dive further into the content. And so if they see that you've been posting about this, you have a lot of resources that you can point people to, again, kind of going to the video side of it as well, they're going to get more use, and they're more likely to convert if they see, okay, this is the person or the company that I need to go with because they have portrayed their value to me. And now I understand why I can't survive without this tool or service.
Yeah. Yeah, they're obviously an expert in the space. Yeah, I would pick that person over someone that has nothing on their website.
100%.
Great. Well, Colin, time for my favorite question. What is your biggest content marketing ick? It can be related to what we've talked about today or something totally different.
It's a great question. I would say the biggest content ick kind of relies or kind of relates to what Google is now like ridding the internet of, and that is speaking on something that you know nothing about. So going back to that analogy of like the kid in high school who's going to talk about a topic even though they don't know what they're talking about, or trusting the teacher who is giving the lesson, has a plan, has a textbook resource that they're pointing to, and providing valuable resources based on what the topic is. So always trust that teacher over that student that's just speaking on whatever they need to get their share of voice, because you'll learn that they are not correct and you don't want to waste time on incorrect information.
Yep. I totally agree. If you want to throw anyone under the bus, go for it.
I'll save
Sounds
naming
like you've
names.
yeah. It sounds like you've seen this and it's frustrating. Great. Well, Colin, where can people go to learn more about you?
I'm an account director at Marketers in Demand, which is a strong agency in the B2B space, and we help technology companies grow, especially if they have a small, scrappy marketing team. I post very consistently on LinkedIn, and I tend to go on rants there about different things that I'm finding and what the truth is behind, the mirror. And I spent my career helping businesses turn marketing ideas into measurable success, even in this world that is getting less and less attribution, making it harder to connect the dots on measurement. And so you'll see me post a lot about how to utilize all of these different tools in the digital marketing space on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the content that you share. You do a really great job of cutting through all the BS, because I think there's a lot of focus on things that don't really matter. So I definitely give Colin a follow. He's great at focusing on the stuff that actually provides an ROI.
Thank you, Baylee. And thank you for having me on as a guest. It was great to be on Content Logistics, and we're very excited to see this episode come out and continue listening to all the great content that you put out on this channel as well, and the great guests that you have on.
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of great guests, you being one of them now. Great. Well, thanks so much, Colin. We will be in touch.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Content Logistics. Make sure to subscribe to the show so you don't miss the next episode. Bye!